chance to practice really developing like an idea or a set of experiments, and then offering that to the group as like a show. And it's quite a big space, so you have a lot of room to do big things. This is actually the smallest I have worked in years. So I started off as a watercolor painter, first as like a kid at the kitchen table, as a lot of people do. And then kind of here and there when I could fit it in, I was doing a lot of waiting tables and cleaning houses and then teaching and not doing any art full time. But when I came to New York, of course you're surrounded by art and seeing art everywhere, and it was actually when I had my first child, which normally is when a lot of people stop making art because of course it becomes so demanding. But my husband is also an artist, and he was really concerned that I kind of not let go of that I didn't just sort of push that to the side and maybe have a lot of regrets later. And I had signed up for a printmaking class, but printmaking is very toxic, and when I found out I was pregnant, I decided not to begin that class. And I ended up starting classes at the Art Students League of New York City, which is on 57th and 5th Avenue. It's been there for ages. And a lot of famous people like Jackson Pollock attended there briefly, and Lee Krasner was a student there. And there's been a lot of folks who kind of crossed their Ai Weiwei, who's a contemporary Chinese artist, who attended there in the 70s and 80s. So that was where I started working more in water media. And I liked watercolor, first of all, because it was not toxic. And I really liked water media because it was sort of familiar. I think, again, having done it as a child, some of that just came back to me very naturally. People don't like watercolor because they feel like they can't control it. You put it down and it sort of does what it wants. But I love that part of it. I think it is pretty, and I think there's something about like letting things happen that's actually really exciting. Like if you make a line yourself, it always looks a little forced, but if you kind of let something drip and it makes a line, it's often this kind of very acceptable or natural or kind of, I don't know, looks right somehow. That are up to like 51 inches, and I was kind of hanging those and doing these really big, almost like a scroll kind of painting or turning it sideways. And for a while, I was really fortunate to have a very big studio. Someone I knew had bought a building with a bunch of folks and was sort of, I think, preparing to maybe sell it then as condos. It had been a fabrication sort of studio on the one of the floors. And the work that I did in that space was all watercolor painting, and led me to continue. I'm going to show you, flip through. There. This is some of the work that led up to this work, so I'll just talk about that really briefly too. In that space, I had a room nearly the size of this garden. It was massive, and so I was really letting the paper get really big and the gestures get really big, and I was using brushes that were like the size of a dinner plate, and it was really exciting because obviously it's very unique, right? I mean, that's something that you don't always have the luxury to do. And what I found is like when you're working that big, you really have to think about, you can flip through and there's lots of things, so pass around, yeah, it's fine. I have a pretty strong case on it because I've got little kids. You know, if you're going to make something that's like 8 feet across, I guess you think maybe more about like, this is something, I'm going to say really big, and we might say that we value education, but if you've been in a public school any time recently, you can see that we don't really value education. Right. They're kind of falling apart as buildings. You know, we might say that we value nature, and yet if you go out to like the Midwest, it's all this tract housing and sort of strip malls, and you know, we're sort of busy tearing that down and making what we want. So I feel like as someone who studies like visual culture, that it's interesting to me that you can kind of get more of a portrait of a culture by what we build and the kind of evidence we leave behind, or how we know what moves and what we do. So for many years I was doing these large-scale watercolor landscapes mostly. And the work began to kind of edge towards the political because, again, I think this was the stuff I cared about. My husband is black. I have 2 sons that are mixed, and they're getting to be, they're like 13 and 9 now. And, you know, the police violence that has been in the news, I mean, really forever. But we have this citizen journalism now. We're getting more of a front row seat to some of it. And, you know, I'm from Minnesota. I knew people who worked with Philando Castile. I mean, it's just sort of heartbreaking to see, like, I have these sons, and what's the world that is out there for them? What are we building and making for them? So some of that work you can see is around like the airport, and I like airport. But when you're in an airport, there's a lot of emotion, right? There's kind of coming and going, and people, you know, leaving, certainly people being detained. And so as I painted them, I was thinking a lot about 9/11 and how these planes became weaponized, and that meant for, you know, kind of increase in power, presidential power. Then I was really thinking about, more recently, obviously, immigration and about the policing, and just like the sort of police mentality that I think we're developing in the country. At that point, I entered the college, and so when I came to the program, it was really as like a painter, but water media had really been central to my practice. I wanted to come to the program not just keep painting, because I was doing that already, exhibiting already, but I was interested in, I had moved to a much smaller studio and was finding myself like unable to work so big and unable to splash back so far. So I was like, what are the other tools? What else do I want to say? I tried to just scale down the paintings, and that didn't really do it for me. And one of the first classes I had in the program was a drawing class. And we were encouraged to use all kinds of material to draw with. I was drawing with like cardboard boxes, I mean, just strange things, anything that would leave a mark, right? And this was my introduction to Sumi ink. I think like most people, I'd seen Sumi ink drawings, or I knew that there was like India ink and Sumi ink, and you kind of have an awareness of it, but I never used it. And what I found was it had a lot of the same really exciting qualities of watercolor. There was opacity, but also intensity. I could make marks that were, like kind of, again, legible. With it was used for drafting for a long time. And they do still sell it now, although I think that's all been replaced with computer work. But I really liked the fact that you could see through it, but it still had some body to it. And I was working with things like fear and memory and sort of layers of policing, layers of profiling that have been built up, layers of trauma, that have like left definitely more than a shadow, in our culture, and how we're sort of carrying around those things as we kind of collect people, as we move through our day. And that's what was interesting to me about this material, is I thought, I can kind of layer in things and think about how that might echo. My dad was not a career military guy, but he spent 4 years in the Air Force he kind of lucked out. He was post Korea, but pre-Vietnam, and he was there in kind of the late 50s, and was a mechanic on these big, huge atom bomb carrying helicopter. So the B-36 and then the 152. And the presence that the United States had was really, there were like 3 of those planes in the air all the time. So we never had a bomb less than 3 hours away from Russia. And this was our constant Pax Americana of like, well, we're protecting democracy. But, and that's of course the mythos that he carries around, is like, well, we were doing it for the right reasons, and we're in the right, and and all those things have become very complicated, right? I mean, for a number of reasons. And so I wanted to recall some of those images. He had some photographs, not a lot, photography is now loads of digital images, but he had a couple black and white snapshots, and that became seminal source material for the set of works that's over here on the right. And a lot of it had to do with the way his sense of order and policing our country and the vision of who we are. My dad grew up in a tiny town in Ohio that's about 5 streets this way, 6 streets this way. And it was interesting to me, when I got married, a lot of people in the city were like, oh, what did they think? Your husband's black. And really it was no issue for, maybe that's why the relationship was there, but he's, in his mind, as someone who calls himself a Christian, like, we're all equal, we're all loved, and that there aren't these divisions. And maybe he, in a very tiny town, was free of having to deal with direct confrontations, and maybe this was different in a diverse environment, but the lip service, the story, the narrative was that isn't the right way to be. And he was very welcoming to was really very welcoming to her children, and still finds it, the conversation we have, he's like, people can't really hate Barack Obama because he's black. I'm like, in fact, they do. Read the comments. So it's been interesting to sort of contrast his upbringing with my upbringing, and kids' upbringing, and again, these ideas of equity, and belonging. The pictures on the left